Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. I'm here with Joel Rawlings. I'm just going to get right into it from the beginning, trying a new thing, even though I'm explaining getting right into it from the beginning. But anyway, Joel and I have got a nice full show for you today. We are going to talk about, what are we going to talk about, Joel?
Well, like always, I always want to talk either football or basketball, and I never want to talk swimming. And then you're always like, what relevance does this have? So, like, I was watching the Bills-Bengals game, and when that one player turned out it was a cardiac arrest, getting a hit to the chest so hard that actually stops the heart. What I noticed on that, before you kind of know what's going on, the seriousness, also you're seeing all these players on the sidelines crying, literally crying, going through a lot of emotions, or they're not playing, they're just done. And I was thinking, like, as far as like this podcast go, I know like anytime I talk to people about, different elements of swimming, we talk about like the emotions that come into play with the athletes. And people are always like, listen, I don't want any of the touchy-feely stuff. I don't want any of the arts and crafts homework. Just tell me how to write a setup. Give me an example of, an endurance set, whatever. And what I thought was interesting is at this point in time, athletes showing emotions is our topics. It is the thing that we need to most worry about as a coach. And obviously in a sport like football, where 10, 15 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, keep playing. In this case, players are like, yeah, we're done playing. We're leaving the field. This is bigger than the game is. And so I think that just shows, again, how sport is evolving and how athlete-centric it's become. You see like with LeBron deciding where he's going to go. You see all these things going on. It's going to trickle back to swimming. If it's not so much trickling back, it's always been there. And I think as coaches, we always just kind of like, well, let's just keep moving forward. This is what I'm going to talk about. This is what we're going to do. This is the set. And I started thinking after I was been enough swim clinics, like, I can figure out how to write a set. I've got Ernie Maglio's book at home. That's what else are you going to need? And so basically, a lot of times, all it is like we're just dressing up the same stuff a little bit differently a lot of times. But what is changing is the athletes' reactions. The parents that we're talking about now, not just helicopter parents, but these snowplow parents they read about in soccer. And that's why I think this is important, like the things that you're doing and how we relate to athletes and how we talk to athletes. I think is one of those things that you can't really have a textbook for, that you just need like experience in talking and listening and trying to understand what's going on behind it. The methods that go in behind what we see. We see the symptoms, but I want to know kind of what's going on behind.
Yeah, something is changing. I totally agree with you on that front, Joel. And I would just add, I've been to plenty of things, and I would argue I still can't quite figure out how to write practice. But I'm not sure that, just designing training is really the most important thing. It's a thing that we spend a lot of time around. I actually think because we've spent so much time on it, I think the median level, and like whoever's listening to this is going to listen to it and go like, I know somebody who just writes stupid practices.
Yeah.
I still think the median level of people designing training is actually really good.
Right.
Like in general, swim coaches are at a pretty high level in terms of designing practices and getting some kind of training that the athletes are going to be able to be fit and be ready. Like they're in that ways way ahead probably of even previous generations in terms of their preparedness. But I do see, I think in many ways what you're observing, and I'm not an American football fan, so I didn't watch any of the Bills stuff as it happened. But everybody wanted to talk about it for 2 weeks, so like I can't help but be aware, and even hit home with me a bit because my wife has a heart condition where she actually passed out on a field during an athletic event and had to go have surgery. So anytime something like that happens, it hits a little bit close to home. And you're right. Probably the biggest sign of change we could see was that, the players electing not to play. And it seems like so culturally abstract that anyone would continue playing that I've seen a lot of discussion. Like people are like, we're trying to figure out if somebody said like that the players have to warm up again and get back on the field. Like
Right.
we're going to find that guy. We're going to
Yeah.
get him. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that guy was totally out of line, right? Whereas, you know, you could imagine in a previous time or space, there would have been like, yeah, like they want us to get back, you know, whoever Damar Hamlin wants us to get back on the field. He would have wanted
Yeah,
us to
right,
finish the
right.
game. You
Yeah.
know, like there would have been some movement towards that. And instead it was this really dramatic shift. And I think that where I come at it from is that, you know, athletes having a lot more autonomy and having a lot more control can seem, I think, scary to a lot of people, especially if you've been successful in a system that doesn't have a lot of autonomy for athletes. But I would argue that this is actually, in the long term, this is a really exciting development. You may not always like, especially as a coach, you may not always like the micro of it. But if you're looking at these situations and you're going, you know, I see that the athletes are able to have more say in what they're doing and able to have more of a piece of the decision-making process. And, you know, it feels like a cultural clash to you. That's probably correct, because most of us that are in a coaching position, we're drawing upon knowledge that is, you know, handed down person by person. And a lot of that knowledge is around various ways you can I don't want to say force, because I actually think it's one of the things that we're running into is that it's impossible to force people to do things in most cases. Like it is actually, when you really think about it, impossible, you know, and more the athletes are realizing, you know, like, hey, if I push back, there's nothing actually, there's nothing that's going to stop me from doing what I want. And so, you know, you have to have some tools in your toolkit as a coach that are like, how can I get people to want to do the things that I think they should do to have a good experience doing the sport and to get better and do, you know, be competitive and all of those things that are at the core of sports and the sports experience. But in a bygone era, we would have sort of had some harsher tactics for getting there, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think that's the thing is you hear coaches like, well, you know, these kids today have changed. These kids, well, yeah, and that's it. You can either, you know, keep on fighting the rain, you know, or get the umbrella out. You know, you can just keep on wailing against, you know, these kids aren't strong anymore because they don't have PE, they don't have this, they don't have that, they're mentally tough. Like, well, now at least you know what you have, and what are you going to do to step back and get them to where you want them to go, and you're going to have to adjust your tactics. So, you know, a team of 100, so 100 kids are going to change to your tactics. You know, Bobby Knight worked for him for a little while, but, you know, look where he's at now. You know, and versus, you know, you making a subtle change. And again, asking the questions, kind of reading the room a little bit more, understanding the emotions behind it. And I've always thought, again, like the psychological aspect of swimming has always been more important than the physiological. You know, you hear about like people that can lift a car off of, you know, in an emergency situation, they can lift a car. They've got that kind of strength, you know, so it's in us to do stuff. And it's just the coaches have to figure out a way to get that out of them. And so I think kind of what we're leading into is, you know, what are some of those tools that we can get to as a coach to, you know, ask the right questions, to kind of read the room, to, you know, it's not voodoo. It's just, you know, just understanding humans. But also in, you know, the second part of that we've been talking about is the idea of we've gone from helicopter parent to snowplow parent, where you see like in this whole breakdown of soccer, how these parents are like, just, pushing it with Snowplow is they're pushing any obstacles out of the child's path so their child can experience success. And I used to kind of think like, anytime a parent would come to me and they would be really aggressive about something, understanding is like, I get it. They think I've hurt their child and now they've got to protect their child. And so what I need us to do is get to the common ground that we both care about the child and that my rationale or what I'm doing is X. And if they think there's a better way, I'd like to hear it, but not in not with the full screaming effect that's coming out right now. What are we going to do to get your child the best? And that's usually, that common ground we're looking for.
Yeah, well, I think there's a thing I want to interrogate in what you just said, because you talked about like, yeah, I mean, are you going to expect as a coach that like whatever 100 kids on your program adjust to you? And I would argue actually that is the most successful model in the sport of swimming is we have, like, can you get a big volume of people generally moving in the same direction culturally? Can you get like enough people in your pool? Can you get, as many people in the lanes as you possibly can with your expenses at the lowest, with the fewest possible coaches
right
on there? And like, can you basically make it work? And I think a lot of people look at it like as financially. So like actually in large part, and this goes into, you shared a question from somebody you used to coach. And I think we're going to get to that as well.
Right.
Too, I see that there's something specifically in the model, like a lot. And I know this because I just came away from coaching and quit a coaching job. I was extremely challenged to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do in terms of the sort of emotional, psychological development of the people I was coaching, because I was responsible for 46 swimmers. And that stuff takes time. It involves talking to people. It involves relationship building. It involves all sorts of stuff that is frankly is more expensive than training. Like training is, we've maximized training so hard because training is fairly easy to deliver on a mass scale.
And it's quantifiable.
A lot of these structures are built.
It's easily quantifiable versus what I was thinking is like when you said is like, emotional development, and this will lead into the conversation we had with my former students, the emotional development. How do you measure that? Like the parents, like, I don't, I see them not doing flip turns very well. It's like, well, emotionally they've gotten better. How? What have you done? It's one of those things where it's not something that's tangible. It's not something quantifiable. And it's such a slow, gradual process. And it might not appear in a, just around the kitchen table. What'd you work on today? You're like, well, I feel more confident. They're not going to really come up with that on their own. It's something that just kind of comes a part of it. And I think that's what you're saying too is the expense, the time, the effort the coach has to put into it. And you want these results. Right. And you got these parents where they come in, what are their expectations? What are their results? And you're saying, confidence and things like that, but it's not a quantifiable thing. And so I think that's one of those things where you, like you said, you keep putting it in there and there's no real measure until they're 35, 36 years old. And they have a stable life ahead of them, Yeah.
Well, like, what I would love for somebody to do? I would love for somebody to actually get in and do some research, like go to a giant swim meet and like actually be able to conduct like who's having a good time. Like go to Winter Junior Nationals. I would like to know somebody to measure honestly how many of the coaches are having a good time at that meet. Would describe like, I am enjoying this competition right now. And then how many of the athletes? Because I would venture to say the number is extremely low. And that's a problem when we look at sports. Like I'm not saying that everybody has to be enjoying it at all times. Right. You're going to have highs and lows with what you're doing. But if you're having a sporting competition and most people are really unhappy for most of it, then, what is it going to be like? What are people drawing upon that's really positive to motivate themselves to do all this stuff? Like, what are they? I always come back to motivation specifically because I think that, and we talked about this on another podcast, that most people are motivating themselves through some form of self-cruelty. They're being they're applying that like sort of mental cattle prod that's like, you do this or else. Right. Like you do this or else coach is going to be mad. You do this or else mom's going to be mad. You do this or else, your teammates are all going to be disappointed. You do this or else you're going to swim slow. Like, you sort of repeat all this stuff to keep you motivated. And one of the reasons why it creates a self-sustaining loop where you don't even know, like, are you miserable at the competition because you've been so cruel to yourself in the whole lead up to the competition. And now when the pressure's really on, like, you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself because your whole motivation has been built around beating yourself up? Or are you using a lot of cruel stuff to motivate yourself because naturally when you look at the competition, you go like, this is not fun. This is not something I'm looking forward to doing. So I have to force myself to do it. And the only way I know how to force myself is by being mean to myself. That's sort of the paradox that I see in a lot of these situations.
And then also, if you're kind of the level of fun, the parents in the stands, because again, we have to talk about all those different layers to it. I mean, we're seeing coaches burning out faster than ever before. The kids are going through a lot more than they ever had before. And now the parents too are feeling stretched thin, financially. I mean, to go to, like you said juniors. Well, you had to fly from somewhere. You got a hotel. It's a few $1,000s for this. And it's like, yeah, it's not exactly going to Disneyland. At the end, you're hoping obviously some sort of development. But at the end of like the Super Bowl, people are like, this is the best thing of my life. I'm going to the Super Bowl. For a lot of kids, juniors is their Super Bowl. And we want it to be like, this is the best thing that's happening to me is I get to go to juniors or whatever the next level meet is. And that's the things we're trying to create stepping stones for them to get from, state level to junior level to senior level. And then whatever their terminal outcome is, it's fine. But each step along the way, kind of the stop and smell roses moment of, I'm having fun here, I'm having fun now, and then I'm with my friends, I'm competing well, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think what you point to with parents is, first off, I think, having only dipped my pinky toe in watching my own children do anything athletic, I can tell you, like, I got from the first second what an emotional experience it is. It's like, in terms of, like I say, I'm not like an American football fan. I joke about that stuff. I really just got out of habit. I used to watch football. I don't watch it anymore. Like, if my daughter's doing an athletic competition, I'm locked in. Like, it's the best sporting event. It's the most engaging sporting event I've been to in years. Mm-hmm, right. Mm-hmm. So there is this sort of natural point where it draws you in, it draws your attention, it draws your engagement. And it's because you have emotion invested in what's happening. Here's a person that's really important to you.
Correct.
And you're watching them do something. And so I think that has always been the case, right? That's not something that has changed over time. Parents have been coming to watch their kids do sporting events, and it's always been a really engaging process. What has probably changed, I think, is that there seems to be a lot of forces, some of their own creation, some to completely out of their control, that are making these parents feel like feel pressure on behalf of, not even on behalf, but around what their kids' tangible, quantifiable results are. In the sport of swimming, we have times, but any kind of, like, are you on the A1 travel team for soccer? Are you,
Yeah.
you know,
That's become the new parent report card. My parent report card is still, if I take my kid to the dentist and I just sit there like, here they're going to come. I was like, no, he looks great. A for the dad,
yeah,
versus the,
yeah, you did it,
he's got a
Joel.
cavity. Teeth look like, that's on me. I'm wearing that one. I've taken the L. But the new parent report card, I was reading about this in soccer, is basically we're looking at, it shows financial stability, that your kid is doing sports. It shows that you're a great parent because your kid's excelling at sports. Obviously it's like, and I'm not saying that that's what it is, but that's what it's kind of starting to become, where like your ability to be a parent is not so much what his report card is, but what the student athlete is like. Are they getting, scholarship offers? Are they, on varsity? Are they the first one down the lane? Whatever it might be. And so the whole parenting thing, and this, again, we've got, international listeners, so it's probably very different there. But in this country, it's becoming that. And I was reading about this in again, with the whole snow plowing soccer parent thing, is a lot of parents are taking they've turned that identity of their kid into their ability to parent. I'm a great parent because look at how my child is doing. And I've got a few athletes I used to coach that now are coaches. No matter how much I told them not to do that, they didn't listen to me once again. But they'll send back like, hey, this is what we gave at the beginning of the speech. We're talking about, trying to create a history and, kind of touchable heroes within the program. This person's doing this person got this scholarship, this person. I'm like, whoa, you said scholarship? And it's like, you screwed up, dude. And they're like, well, it shows that we're thinking about college, even when they're 8th grade. It's like, no, you just said money. As soon as that is, and you look at what parents do, like one of the studies I was looking at, they take kids. The kids have always been the same. Why do you do this sport? I like having fun. I like being around my friends. And then the third thing could be a million other things, but friends, having fun are the top two for every kid. And the parents now all of a sudden is creeping into the 6th, 7th, 8th. I want leadership skills. I want a scholarship. And so now those two things are just totally incongruent. Because now all of a sudden that pressure is on them. They're like, I'm a bad parent if my kid's not succeeding. I'm doing this, and my parents doing, And so again, once that money's in there, then I think that becomes part of the thing where it's kind of like the fraternity hazing thing. What locks you in is like, I've been through all of this, then it must be worth it. So like I got up 4 a.m. to get my kid to this swim meet all the way across the state. This must be worth it. What am I doing it for? Oh, yeah, scholarship. They're not thinking at 4 a.m., I want to make sure my kid has fun. My kid would have fun playing at the playground. It doesn't mean I have to drive across state and spend $800 to go to the state meet, to have fun. You can have fun anywhere. I'm thinking scholarship. I'm thinking leadership. And so all these things start to fill in, and it kind of leads into what we were talking about, where all of a sudden something changes, and the parents have put financial investment, time investment, emotional investment into their child's sport and their sports, and their child's like, either they've hit a plateau or they're taking a step back. And one of the kids I coached, he's saying like, yeah, well, where's that finger getting pointed to, the blame? It's coach's fault. My kid's not motivated. That's on you. I drive into practice. Why isn't he or she motivated? That's on you. They don't like the sport. That's on you. And then the next part is, obviously, if they're not 100% engaged, you're not always going to get the times you want. How come these people are excelling? That's on you, the coach.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things. One, I hear you talk about the other parents, and like probably Denmark has got to be the country where we get the most listeners. And actually, this concept of snowplow, even when I was coaching over there, they would refer to the type, sort of the parental behavior that you're talking about here as curling parents, because curling's a big winter sport. The two people that go in front of that little puck and they sweep all the ice out of the way, so that puck can just travel. I don't know. Is that even called a puck? I don't know. I
think it's a marketable curling skill, though, compared to what I have from coaching. Yeah. I could have learned how to sweep. I would have joined curling. My parents have been on top of that game early. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go on.
Yeah. So anyway, they called them curling parents, but I do think like there's a piece of this where I always want to look internally to our coaching culture, like what can we control and what can we not control. We can all sit around and complain about the place that we've gotten into with with parents, because I do think culturally things are not going well overall. I think we can find plenty of evidence of that, big and small, even, like within our own lives. And then some of these giant examples, like the one with U.S. soccer and the Berhalters and the Reinas. And you could go read that article. Just Google Berhalter, Reina,
awesome.
U.S. soccer to just read some craziness, right? But, I think that part of what's happened here is that youth sports groups have actually, a lot of parents have gotten very estranged from the process as we've kind of tried to professionalize things. So, a lot of these models used to exist with, there was a coach. The coach was kind of part-time, kind of full-time. There was a lot of volunteer labor involved in doing anything. There were a lot of parents helping out. And part of those parents helping out was they got to be on the inside of what was doing. And if they were really engaged with what was going on, they were close to things and they actually understood better, I think, what was going on. I think in today's day and age, if your attitude is, as a coach, hey, I'm the professional, just as you put it, drop your kids off at practice and I'll do the rest, right? And you just stay out of it. Feed them, get them to the competitions, right, get them to practice, everything else. You better be charging a shit ton of money for that. Because actually what you've signed up for is a ton of work. Mm-hmm. It's a ton of work. But what I've seen is a lot of these cultural, they've gone, that's sort of their attitude. And then they go, but that'll be $3,000 a year. And yeah, it's really expensive to be in the sport for all the other things you have to do. But the part that's actually going to the coach is pretty small. Right. And the coach is therefore trying to do that, exactly what we've described, at a giant scale. And when they try to do it at a giant scale, they can't deliver all that stuff. They just can't. And so the parent is going well, I expected, that you would handle everything else. And they're not. If they're really being honest with themselves, they're not handling everything else. Right. They're providing a good training environment. They're probably helping the kid to be competitively really successful in the sport. But in terms of the rest of it, they're probably not delivering on it. And that's not a knock on them specifically. I bet they could if they weren't trying to do it at the scale that they were actually trying to. Right. So I do think there's that. And I think even more coaches have not policed their own in terms of there are people out there in the coaching profession. And if you've been listening to me for a long time, you've probably heard me talk about many of them and share my opinion on many of them who can get kids to swim pretty fast. And their process for doing it is horrible for people. And we've all just gone well, if you get a kid to swim fast, that means you're a good coach.
Or that will take care of all the other things too. Is I got them to swim fast. Now they got a good scholarship. They're off. Their life has started pretty darn well now. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But part of the thing, just take a step back, is that previous model of allowing parents in. The counterpoint is when the pendulum swings the other way, I guess. You got all these parents with an agenda on your board and you're like, oh my gosh, and so we always harken back to the one or two parents that, worked 40 hours. They worked another 20 hours for the club there and you're I don't know how they did it, but some parents can do it. Some parents can and can stay out of it. But there's so many that come in that become so agenda based that it makes your life just, now you've got to cater to this one kid because that one board member keeps pushing. So kind of, we want them to be dropped off at the pool on one end. On the other end, we want involvement because we want understanding from the parent of what all goes into this. I'm not just going to practice from 3:30 until 5:30 or whatever the time shift. I'm not just working 3-4 hours a day on the pool deck. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on. So having those parents that are in, it's nice that they see you working 90 hours a week versus the ones that think, right, oh, you're working 20 hours a week. Why should we pay you more than $35,000? That's ridiculous. I'd love to play with kids for that kind of money.
Right. I mean, I would put a differentiate, I would put a big differentiation. You talk about parents that are volunteering themselves up for a leadership role. I would argue with any swim coach, think about the parents that are willing to volunteer at your meets. Like, think about that parent that's, I know I coached some kids where their parents were willing to be on the pool deck with us for 12 hours on a Saturday at a meet. Those people are incredible.
Right.
Like, and you those are the people who are actually engaged in what you're doing. And they're most often not also the people who are going to be on your, board of directors, right? Those somehow there's no cross pollination between those two groups. The people who are really willing to help and the people who say, like, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
But my help exists of me sitting on this organization and as you said, coming with my own agenda. It is one of the things I think, if there's anything that probably could deserve to be replicated out of Jersey Wahoos to other board-run swim clubs in America, is that they actually have a board that has a couple of parents from the team, and everybody else on it is somebody I think it's 9 people, and 2 out of 9 are parents of kids on the team. And that's been a very, I think, slow cultural evolution over a long period of time, very purposefully designed. There's been some people who've been leading on that. But I do think that is one thing that helps a lot. And I saw it in, not in swimming, but in non-swimming board-run youth sports teams in Denmark. If they could figure out a way to make it not just, like 5 people who happen to have kids on the swim team right now,
right,
they'd be a lot more successful with that model.
One of the things you also mentioned was professionalism. So you're talking about like parental involvement, like, what level are we kind of looking for? Again, and then also, because I think that's kind of the relationship you need to have, is like, what level are the parents involved in, and keeping them abreast of the idea of like what the goals of the child are, what the goals of your program are, and letting them know those are the things that are running this. And that if the parents have a different set of goals, we can talk about them, see if they're compatible or incompatible with what the program's doing. But then the next step is the idea of that pendulum of professionalism. Is professionalism somewhat killing our sport? And, obviously with all the allegations and true allegations of molestation, all these horrible things that have gone on with coaches in swimming and other youth sports. So obviously we're like, yes, we need professionalism. Yeah. But there's also a level of professionalism where I think where we become so sanitized in a sense. I remember, you remember back to your days of youth swimming, everyone always kind of smiles about 1 or 2 coaches. They were like oddballs or eccentric. Things like, and again, not in a malicious way, not in some sort of way where it harms a child, but just, again, people like, that coach that always wear cutoff denim shorts and like a tank top or something to the pool, just didn't quite look right. But now all of a sudden everyone has their, their tucked in pressed, polyester polo shirt with their name on the left-hand side of the pocket. They've got their khakis, they've got their belt, and you're not allowed to have that really high emotion when they're swimming. Because a high emotion, like, well, is it you're giving more to that child than my child, or that high emotion becomes like over the top throwing a stopwatch? That's not allowed. But again, you can't have so low emotion. Well, geez, that guy just doesn't care about my kids either. Again, this professionalism has gotten to the point where I think a lot of personality gets kind of rubbed out, and not that it's a horrible thing. So I guess that's why I want to know your opinion. Is professionalism kind of like maybe kind of starting to kill it a little bit?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I would love for I actually think it's not so much professionalism as much as very gray boundaries around what is professionalism and what is not. And I think it's a nice goal to have some youth sports teams run professionally.
Sure.
But what we've done is like 10%, and we've taken maybe a lot of the worst 10% of professionalism and adopted that, and then said like we're trying to professionalize, right? So to me, a professional environment would be one where, a team actually has enough people to do all of the functions that a youth sports team has to do without the need for volunteers to be involved with anything, right? And that all those people, that they can afford to like be competitive with your median, professional workplace, in terms of salary and work hours and structure and all that benefit. And that describes almost nowhere in the sport of swimming. So instead, we've gone to like almost sort of suggesting that we're in to a professional environment. And because we haven't gone all the way, it's left a lot of teams in the gray area. And naturally, most teams wouldn't be able to do that. Right. But maybe you would have to clearly define, like, what's our mission here? Are we actually trying to run a sort of professionalized sporting environment? Or are we just like are we a community organization that offers some competitive sports stuff, and like things are going to be unprofessional in a certain, like, not in a bad sense,
Right,
like you
right.
say, but there's going to be stuff that like you should just expect, like on this kind of team for this kind of price. Like I for instance, like, again, a lot of the sports stuff I've signed my own daughter up for is done through the recreation department in my town. And a lot of it's done in 6-week blocks. And on average, I would say I pay $100 for her to play a sport for 6 weeks. And like, what do I expect for $100? Honestly, that she gets to show up to it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't really expect almost anything else to happen at that thing, because that's what I'm paying for. And it's a recreational, like, it's very clear what it is. Right. And I think a lot of this youth sports stuff is sitting in some weird gray area where we don't know whether it's sort of a just a notch above recreational, or whether we're really trying to run a, sports academy for budding Olympians. Right. You look at like all the freaking teams. One of the things that drives me crazy and is the, all the teams with national in the name of whatever their top group is. And like, how many kids in that group? Like, we were one of the top 20 teams in America. We couldn't fill a top group full of people with national, even though we called it national squad. Yeah, we couldn't fill a group. Right. With a group of people that were qualified for some kind of national competition. Yeah. But it's like, it's we think, and then, I'm off on my own rant about this whole thing, but you get the point.
Yeah. I think one of the things I noticed when I started in college, or actually when I first started coaching, was I felt like, I was so young, parents aren't going to listen to me unless I start looking the part. And so obviously you're going to look the part, you're going to show up on time, you're going to be dressed presentable, which is obviously professional appearance. And then the more I started getting into college, the more I started to kind of look, and you could just see on team photos, like as soon as you just scroll through it, this isn't a professional team. I would just kind of look at like the coaching staff, or I'd look at the website. There's like so many things that just kind of create that. I guess we're creating that marketing image of what our team is supposed to be. We call it the national team. We call it all these things. And I wonder if we've also kind of raised this level of expectation. But with that level of expectation, and you alluded to this before, is we haven't raised the level of finances coming in, and I think for me, I'm a relatively rational parent. And anytime I'm paying for my son to do an activity, I'm not thinking what kind of scholarship he's going to get in 10 years. I'm thinking, is going to be around people that I want him to be like, both like as peers and as coaches. Are they teaching him some sort of valuable skill? And can I drop him off for an hour and I can go do something else for an hour and I don't feel like he's unsafe? And I'm looking at that as that's become something I would pay anything for. But I think I'm fairly rare in that regard, because now we've got all these, again, these different levels of clubs. Again, we're all looking the same. We all have the same arena or Speedo or whatever polo we have on, we all have the same, we all look the same, but obviously each club is going to have different things to it, and we're trying to present that. Yet the price tag is part of the issue too, where if you have a daughter or son that does gymnastics or dance, it's unbelievable how expensive it is relative to swimming. Yet we're like, are we saying that we're less of a professional coach than a gymnastics coach is? But if you go by how we're charging, it definitely is. And so part of that too is, so we've talked about just the expectations of the parents, the expectations of the kids, the expectations we put upon ourselves. And I always look at some of these programs, again, collegiate or club, where they'll hire that 20-something who has nonstop energy to throw it. Whatever the problem is, I will just stay up all night and solve it because I don't have a child to get to school the next day. I'll just sleep in for 4 more hours. I'm splitting a house with 4 other people. I need $100 a month for rent versus I've got a mortgage. And so again, they want this professionalism. They want all this other things that come with it, but you always want the cheapest price. And when you have things where like you can just kind of throw, when you're at that level where you have energy and time to throw at a problem, at some point, that's when you kind of, they hit that wall where like, all right, now they've gone to sell insurance, or they're still kind of ambling through the coaching, hoping that they can kind of get a lifestyle balance. And obviously pay has to do some of that lifestyle balance because, we try not to live on the street as we coach.
Yeah, I think you're getting to something that is obviously it's extremely hard. I mean, it is that there's no easy solutions to this. And I was just scrolling up so I could remind myself of the text message that you forwarded me from somebody that, against your best advice, decided to coach because I wanted to make sure that we address that. I'm just going to sort of read it out loud, and I'm going to tie it back into what we're saying here. The guy writes, he says that he has somebody, I'm going to paraphrase, he has somebody that he coaches that cries after every single race. Was really good as a 12 and under, 14 now. Feels as if the parent of this swimmer blames him for everything. And he's trying to shrug it off. But like he's essentially asking, how do you help somebody that's in their position? How do you react when they come up to you and they've just raced and they're in tears because they're really disappointed in how they did? But you also, there's a flavor of this that I get out of the text where he's saying like, that's what I expected. Like I saw this train wreck coming for hundreds of miles. And so, it's really hard for me to react in that moment. And I thought a long time about this after you sent it to me. And I know that my initial answer is completely unsatisfying, but it is related to what we've been talking about here. Look at the structure of what you're doing coaching wise. I bet you if you in this situation, that with enough time and attention, you could, or like here, I'm going to boost up your confidence. You can do something about this. Like you can help this person. You can get in there and change the course of somebody swimming like this. But you probably are not doing it because you have 25 other people that are in somewhat of a similar situation. And that if you get in too deep coaching this one person, that it's going to take your attention away from everything else you're doing. And then you're going to have 20 other parents that are angry at you. And you're anticipating that. And so you're just going like, I'm just going to see, like, I'm going to try a few things here, like, off and on. But if it doesn't work out, it just doesn't work out. And that's why you're probably, so like, think about your structure. And like, I thought there was great value in what we talked about last time, even the stuff with warm up. Like, yeah, okay, I understand the thing I'm saying right now is pie in the sky. But everybody should recognize that the way we have structured swim teams isn't necessarily the best way. It's not like Moses came down from on high and went, you must have as many people in the lane as possible and one coach for 50 swimmers, like you can do it. No, it's not. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to agree with it. And when you start thinking about how you might do it, I do now, especially I do coaching outside of the team structure. And I can tell you, I've had so many conversations with parents who are probably a parent you view as a problem on your team where I go, if you could get X and Y and Z, would you pay a lot more to be on the swim team that you're at? And they never say no. They never say no. And I think nobody's asking them. Like nobody's saying like, hey, here's the, extra platinum elite package, and here's what you actually get above and beyond what you're normally getting. And they're creating more business for me, but like I don't need to be in business supplementing that end of it.
One of the things that you just, two parts. First, of what you're saying right now, I think is really important too, is the ability to step back. And that's what I've noticed when I stopped coaching, that ability when you're not in the fight every day. We get so literally like in the battle of like, getting these kids faster, dealing with parents, all these things, everything is coming at you. When you're literally able to step back and divest yourself emotionally, just a little bit emotionally, you can think through these things so much more rationally. And I think that's why consultants are more, kind of tying into what we talked about, why consultants are important, is the idea you need someone that can just step back. It doesn't mean like you're coming in with like, oh my God, that's the most, amazing thing I've ever heard. This is something that it's obvious, and it's like a no-duh moment is really what you get more from a consultant. And I feel a little better in that the advice I gave was similar to your advice. And I feel awful that my advice is your advice. My advice is like, we are the, if you're lying on the Serengeti and all these zebras are going by you, then your job is not to figure out a way to get the one at the end up with the front. Your job is like to attack that end zebra. And coaches are always like, right, how do we get this last person or this person that's not enjoying it to get up to the front? And we spend all of our time on the last, that we forget there's a herd of, again, you have 100 kids on your swim team, and really you can think of like 2 or 3. They're like, God, what do we do about this, this, this? When if you took that effort, because we don't have the time, we don't have the space, we don't have the ability, capacity to deal with just 3. I'm going to focus on the 97 that are moving. And I felt really bad about that, just being like, you know what? You can't spend all your time when you're the only coach on deck and there's all these other things. Obviously, my response is I want to be like, oh, well, you just do this, this, this. You spend in 10 hours of counseling, and you got that. It's like, well, I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that life. Or like, all the way back to the heart attack example to start the whole thing was, I remember I used to teach CPR. It was, there's asystole when there's no electrical activity. It's like the heart stopped. You can keep doing CPR, but it's you pushing on that heart. And that's the only thing that's keeping it beating, is literally you doing all the work to keep the beating heart, versus, the AD kind of like starting up. If there's electrical activity, there's a chance. If there's no electrical activity, it's you putting all the effort. So this kid with no spark, whoa, that analogy coming to a head here. No spark. You're spending all your time, all your effort, just getting that kid to get to practice, to just smile one time, just to have a good 100. Meanwhile, again, there's 99 kids that are like, yo, coach, what about me? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. I get no love.
Right. No, I think, and a coach who's given themselves a hard time, that this kid in particular isn't having a good experience.
Oh yeah, that eats us alive.
They're actually creating a really positive experience around swimming for so many kids. Yeah. And then yet probably that coach is miserable at some competitions because they go, yeah, but I didn't get, the 30th zebra to run as fast as the rest of the other zebras, and they don't even realize they're personally, they are a miracle worker in what they're doing. Like getting people to swim, first off, it's just not I don't care what you've told yourself. It's not easy. It's hard. This thing's completely unnatural. Yeah. The fact that if you've got a team full of people that can swim butterfly to the other end, show that to your average person. Yeah. It'll blow their mind, right? The thing that you can get all these people to do. And yet I have so many swim coaches who are walking around with their head down, oh man, I suck. And I can't figure this out. And what's wrong with me? And it's give me a break.
All right.
All right. We got to bring it to a close because there's more stuff to do in life for all of us. But I want to say thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to Joel for joining me as usual and being willing to just shoot off in every other direction with me. If you want more positive psychology-based content, Instagram, Christy_coach, Facebook, Krista Sanis Coaching. And please, this week, let this be the week that you engage on the YouTube version of this. for no other reason than and who could timestamp this one, by the way?
I was waiting for you to like bring in why. All you're seeing is your white kitchen, my white kitchen. It's about as basic as we can get. So, but yeah, if you want to watch YouTube,
I don't know. I just
ahead,
want you to.
All right. Well, or send us in. It'd be interesting to hear other coaches like they got an issue like that, because again, it's good to hear, because I don't feel like such a horrible human being where I'm just like, dude, cut bait.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. All the best stuff we get for this are listeners submitted. So we appreciate you all. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again next week.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.